Welcome to the last chapter in this series. This is chapter 12, Supporting Printers. In this chapter, we're looking at the different types of printers, their features, how to install them, share them, uh, basically talk about a few add-on devices. We're also going to look at printer queues. We're going to talk about routine maintenance, and we're also going to talk about troubleshooting. A key thing here is we're also going to talk about the processes for like laser printing, how they function. So printer types and features, we're going to be talking about how to configure, repair, and maintain printers in general. And we're going to look at how printers work. That way we can have a better understanding of how to fix them. Again, we're not specializing in printing here. We're just looking at a very general maintenance view. So when you click print, what happens? That's a huge issue. There has to be some type of communication between the computer and the printer itself. And so the printer uses different languages to communicate. We can either do a PostScript command to build the page, or the printer could use a PCL command to build the page. PCL stands for Printer Control Language. So depending on the language used will depend on the print driver that's used. They are slightly different, so they do look different on a page. Windows GDI builds pages, then sends it to the printer. That's the graphical device interface. With Windows 7 and above, it uses a XML printer specification called XPS to build the page. Or you have the raw data printed with little to no formatting on a page. So depending on how the printer is set up and the print driver, you may end up with different languages printing to a page. And again, that's going to be the language that's used to build the material on a page. So let's talk about types of printers. The major categories that we're going to be looking at is going to be laser, inkjet. Inkjet is just ink dispersion, thermal, and impact printers. Now, by no means is this a detailed list of major printers. Like, we haven't even touched 3D printing. That's because for this exam, it's outside of this scope. So let's look at laser printing. Laser printers use a electrophotographic printer. It uses both mechanical and electrical and optical technologies to print. Big thing with laser printing is it fuses the toner into the paper so it becomes one. Essentially how it works is toner is placed on an electrically charged rotating drum, and then the toner is deposited on the paper, moving the drum at speed. The major 7 steps for laser printing, and this one is important because it's very commonly tested on, is the 7 steps. The first one is called processing image. A bitmap of a final page is stored in memory on the printer. Conditioning phase will change the drum of the laser jet surface to a negative 600 volt charge. The writing phase will take a laser beam and it will write a negative 100 volt image to the drum surface, so there'll be a change in voltage. Developing, the toner is applied to the negative 100 volt area of the drum. Transferring, the toner draws off the drum onto the paper. Fusing will heat and pressure fuse toner to the paper. That's where it starts becoming one. Cleaning the drum will be cleaned of residual toner and charge, ready for the next one. Essentially, if you've ever taken a glue stick and you wrote on a glue stick on a piece of paper, you threw glitter on it, and then you shook off all the extra glitter, that's essentially a dumbed down version of laser printing. The color laser printing, the writing process is repeated 4 times, 1 for each major color. Parts that are used in the exchanging, exposing, and the developing and cleaning must undergo the most wear. So normally they're all housed together, but a big part of that is going to be in the toner cartridge, and that's going to be what's being replaced the most often because that has the drum, it has the roller, it has everything. Other printer parts may be the pickup roller, separation pads, and that's going to be the things that help feed the paper into the actual printer. Printer that is enabled to print on both sides of the paper, they're called duplex printers because it does both sides. Moving on to inkjet. Uses a type of ink dispersion printing. Basically, it sprays the color onto the page. It doesn't provide high quality resolution like a laser printer does. The print head will move across the paper one line of text at a time. And one line of text is very subjective. We're not talking about a single character because a character may require several passes. So it's small areas, one line at a time. The ink is applied to paper using a matrix of small dots. Plates with magnetic charges direct the path onto the page. Again, this is a very slow, time-consuming process. So when we actually look at the major two types, laser versus inkjet, first of all, how the ink gets on the page is one, but also printing speed is another, because that becomes an issue, is with inkjets, they print slower. With laser jets, they print faster. And sometimes we're talking like a 12-page for inkjet versus like a 60-page laser. But then the issue then becomes is what type of printing are we doing? Are we looking at printing a photograph? If we are, because of the photograph paper, we can't do that in a laser jet. We have to do that in an inkjet. So they do have their situations where each one is better. You just have to understand the technology to figure out which one you're going to use given a specific situation. So when we normally compare the two, inkjets are normally slower. Images smudge due to inexpensive paper, typically. The main advantage is you can use 2 or 4 separate cartridges, but again, laser jets are the same way for color laser jets. Another common one is an impact printer. This is best known for dot matrix printer, old printers that actually will force a printer head to move across the width of the paper that push into it. Pins shoot against a cloth ribbon, and then the ribbon impacts the paper and deposits the ink. Normally, this is really good for tractor feeds, allowing events and data logging, normally for carbon copies. This is durable. You also end up with checks being done on impact paper. Guides for maintaining the print head is basically keep them in a cool environment, well vented. Don't do several pages at a time. You have to be able to let the device cool down. 50 to 75 pages, again, very subjective. Normally, you print a little bit, you let it cool down, you print a little bit, you let it cool down. How much you print really depends on your printer and your environment. Thermal printing is the last major one we're talking about in this section, and this uses heat to create an image. Direct thermal printers versus thermal transfer printers. Burns dots on a specific coated paper versus uses a ribbon that coats wax-based ink. The heating element melts the ribbon cable onto the thermal paper, and this is normally used to do receipts, barcode labels, clothing labels, container labels, things of that nature. This is reliable and easy to maintain, but they are different from other printers. So how do we install, share, and manage printers? So a printer can be connected to a single computer or can be networked so that several computers can access it, just kind of depending on the type of printer that we have. So if we're looking at a network printer, they're probably going to have some type of wireless or wired network card in it. That way the printer can communicate on the network. Otherwise, it may just have a local connection like a parallel or a USB connection. And in that case, it will be just a single PC one. However, you can take a PC and you can share a printer through that PC, meaning if someone wanted to print to that printer, it'd go to your computer, then to the printer. So your computer would have to be on and whatnot. So there is a way to have a local printer shared with other PCs. So, operating system drivers are required. That's pretty straightforward by all of the other material that we've covered. We have a driver that covers our operating system and our hardware. And just like anything else, they come both in 32-bit and 64-bit depending on the operating system that you have. Though Windows 7 does have a lot of pre-built-in drivers, one of the issues is if you want a lot of the functionality, you may have to download the specific print drivers for your printer. For example, we have a Canon here. In order for us to use some of the duplex settings on our Canon, we have to have the Canon software. Even though by default, the majority of the printer works, we don't get some of the advanced features without installing the appropriate drivers. So let's look at where a shared printer may be hooked up. So in this example, we have both a network printer, where all of the PCs are hooked up to a network printer, and then we also have people hooked up to a shared printer through computer A. So if you want to print to this local printer, you're going to be printing to PC A, and then PC A would actually do the printing. I've seen this happen in a few instances where the network printer may be black and white, and this local printer may be color. That way, they put the color printer next to like a manager. That way, they can see who's printing what. That's not always the case, but I mean, it's very common. So how do we install a local printer or a network printer? Normally, ways to install them is you follow the instructions. Normally, they're going to be USB. You plug in the USB cable, and it should automatically install the printer. If not, you may have to download the appropriate drivers off the manufacturer's website. Let's say you have an HP 2010 printer. You'd go to the HP website, go to their support, you'd find the appropriate printer that you purchased, and there should be a download there for the drivers. Download them and install them. If you're installing a non-USB printer, they're rare, but they are still out there. You have verified the printer is on and available, and in the Windows 7 control panel, or depending on the version that you have, you go to control panel, devices and printers, and you can add it that way. You would click add a printer, and you could do a search. You could find it based off of IP address, or you'd find it based off of per port. It all depends on the additional printer that you're trying to install that is not a standard USB one. If we're looking at installing a printer, whether it be XP or a different operating system, again, you're going to be following the same general steps. Even though in XP, we're not really going to be using it anymore since it's already end of life, you still may run into them. But again, you're looking at maybe you'll have a parallel port, not a USB. But again, most of the time, it's going to be USB. Here is the actual steps that you may get. This will be the add printer screen. You'll follow the appropriate on-screen prompts. Enter the information as required. Again, you may be required to create a new port if it's a network-based printer. You'll follow the appropriate on-screen prompts. Here are the steps for installing a network printer. You'd choose TCP, you'd put in the appropriate IP address, and then you'd supply the appropriate drivers. All right, so how do we share and install the printer? First of all, we have to assume that the printer is installed already. In Windows 7, you have to turn on file and print sharing. In XP, you again have to make sure it's installed and working. Again, if you have different operating systems, you have to make sure to have the appropriate versions of drivers, both 32 and 64-bit, depending on what you have. You would right-click on the printer, and you would click Share. You could also manage certain features and add-ons to that device by right-clicking on the printer and clicking on its properties. Maybe the printer properties, not just specifically properties, but you may have to select the appropriate printer properties. In my example, I have a Canon NF6100. I have a PLC5, a PLC6, PS3. These are all the different drivers for the same printer. I only really have one Canon MF 6100. But I'm going to right click on it and you're going to notice there's a properties and a printer's properties option. I want to go to printer properties option. And this is where you're going to have like the preferences, the sharing if you want to share it, the ports it's attached to. If you want to set up the advanced features like when you want it available, if you want it printing directly to the printer, if you want specific drivers, if you want color management, security, who can print to and from it, specific drive device settings, and my printer also allows for a properties, but I mean you're gonna have to play with your appropriate printer to get the settings that you're looking for. Not all printers are created equal, so you actually get depending on what you pay for. So after we've installed the printer, you may want to choose specific add-ons. Maybe you want double siding. Maybe you want stapling. Maybe you want 3-hole punch. It all depends on your printer and the features you've paid for. So let's talk about managing the printer. Spooling is one of the big things we have to manage because spooling is the process of querying print requests from an application. Essentially, we print from a Word document. But if we're printing to a network printer, well, the printer has to queue all of the print jobs it receives. And one of the big things is there an order to them? If I send it to it and my boss sends it to it, who's going to get the print job first? And again, that's all with priorities and things of that nature. So there are a lot of things there. The next thing is, how do we manage them? We can manage them by actually opening up the printer icon or by looking in devices and printers and again looking at the print queue there. We may not be able to cancel all of the print jobs. We may only be able to cancel our specific jobs, but you should be able to look at the particular print jobs by looking at the printer queue, and you should have a pause, restart, cancel. The cancel is a way to delete or remove old print jobs, because sometimes some of them may get errored out for whatever reason, so we may have to be able to delete them. So how do we do printer maintenance and upgrades? One of the big things is we want to read the manufacturer's directions, and anything that they say to do for routine maintenance, we want to make sure that we're doing it. Normally, it's going to be things like cleaning it out, regular maintenance like that. That's going to be the big thing. On the printer's manufacturer's website, we're looking for things like online documentation, maybe updates. If common parts are going out, maybe replacement parts. Sometimes some companies sell a maintenance kit. Sometimes they don't. Common icons that you may see. I've not really seen a lot of these. I have seen hot surface, but neither of these icons for hot surface. So you wanted to make sure that you understand the symbols for the printers you're working on. Also make sure that you understand that there is support for printers. So protection when working inside of a printer, turn it off, unplug it, let it sit for 30 to 40 minutes. It may hold a charge. If it's a laser printer, don't look in the laser. Maybe wear an anti-static grounding strap. Also, because we are working with printers, maybe keep someone nearby just in case. Printers can cause some serious damage, so we do want to keep that in mind. So how do we install an inkjet toner or cartridge? You pretty much put it in. How do you install a toner cartridge? Again, you put it in. How do we clean a printer? Well, it kind of depends on the printer we're looking at. If we are looking at a traditional inkjet printer, you're going to clean outside of the printer with a damp cloth. Not super wet, but just damp. We're not going to use anything ammonia. Normally, distilled water is going to be the best. We are not to blow out toner with a compressed air. We want to make sure we're doing this safely. Maybe use a toner vacuum. canned air or compressed air, and it works in a pinch, but I mean, it's fine particulates, so you want to maybe try vacuuming it out first and then compressed air. Maybe even looking at a some type of brush for inkjet cartridges. You're going to be rubbing alcohol. You're going to be cleaning the metal contacts. You may be looking at getting specific replacement maintenance kits. That's always a big thing. Sometimes printers have both hard drives and memory internally, and so you may have to remove the component and put them back in depending. Here's an example of hard drive and memory and upgrade modules. This is for a big multifunctional printer though, not like a small desk one. Again, this is going to have manufacturer documentation, which you're going to want to verify everything with. So you also may have a print server or a print management tool. So the print server itself could be a dedicated machine. It could be dedicated hardware, maybe software that manages print jobs. It just kind of depends. A lot more companies are going to dedicated print servers. That way they can kind of control costs. Some companies are doing it via software. Printwise, for example, is a very popular software printing management tool. It allows schools to control who's printing what and track them. That way they can be charged appropriately. For example, where I work, if you want to print a black and white page, it's 3 cents per page. And it's you print your page, you log into the software, and you release the print job. It only is released if you have sufficient money to pay for the print job on your student account. So Windows has a pre-built-in Windows Print Manager for local printers. So let's talk about troubleshooting. What happens if the printer doesn't print? Again, we're going to go through the basic troubleshooting processes, interview the user, find out the last time it worked, try to make an initial determination of the problem, when the problem started, when it was solved, maybe check with other clients, see if it was solved, and then go back to documentation. Here we're doing that 5 general steps for troubleshooting. So maybe use a flowchart to help isolate the problems. Maybe try to narrow it down between local PCs or network PCs, depending on the type of printer. Maybe try to narrow it down to print drivers. Maybe try power cycling the printer and making sure everything's plugged in. That's a big common one for me is my printer doesn't work. I power cycle the printer, I double check all the cords are connected correctly, and it fixes the problem the majority of the time. You can find troubleshooting flowcharts for printers depending on the items you're having issues with. So let's see if the printer doesn't print. How can we troubleshoot that? Maybe verify the printer's on. Maybe look at if there's paper. Maybe see if it's feeding the paper. If it's not working, you can always take it to a certified print job or a print repair company. Realistically, nowadays printers are so damn cheap and they're so damn expensive to work on. If you can't get it working, you try troubleshooting it. You power cycle it. You make sure that the drivers are working. You try doing print test jobs, both from the printer itself and the PC. If it's still not working, you buy a new printer. Printers are so cheap now that it's very common just to replace printers. Also, maybe look at cables. It could be a cable issue. Double check that the cables are all functioning. Maybe it's a problem with connectivity. Some PCs can print, and some people can't print. We're going to be looking at can we verify network connectivity between them. Maybe we have to, again, power cycle the equipment, power cycle the printer, power cycle the PC. Again, try to print test pages. If we're looking at a shared printer, is the PC sharing the printer? Is it on? Can it print? Can any PC print? Do we have the appropriate user that can print to it or from it? maybe delete all the print jobs that are on it. Maybe one print job is freezing, and that's why all the other people can't print to it. Maybe look for updated drivers. If we're looking at it, make sure we're printing to the correct printer. Maybe look at the printer as a memory usage. If we're looking at poor print quality, maybe again, if we're at a laser jet, unplug it, clean it. Maybe look at the toner cartridges, clean it out. Maybe look at the quality of the paper, clean the printer itself. Poor quality could be, depending if it's a distorted image, could be because there's foreign material in the printer. If it's a gray background, maybe the drum is wearing out. If it's bad quality, maybe there's an issue with the toner cartridge itself. Normally, if you take them out, shake them out, you should be good. Quality with an inkjet, again, paper, ink, same similar steps. Maybe clean with a sponge, clean with rubbing alcohol. Poor quality for impact, same thing. Maybe clean the printer itself, clean its ribbon heads, all of that. Garbled characters on paper could be a driver issue. It could also be low memory. If it's printing issues on color, it could just be a color issue. Could be certain quality for color. And yeah, that's it for this chapter. I want to thank you.